I've got here a pair of Voyager tool clamps. These are from their Panther F set. This one I've used for so far both Panthers. I'll have to dig into the other one, which is a full one. Show you how I do these, but first, it's still a little delicate here. These are both still operational. Although this one, the little bracket on the top, the spring part of it is not bent quite enough. I'll have to tweak that a bit, but once there's a tool in there, it'll grab quite nicely. To close, you simply lock them back. And like I said, this one doesn't work quite as nicely. But I'll show you how to do these, and really all you need for these are a couple of pairs of tweezers, and you will need a couple of pairs for this, and you'll see why in a moment. It doesn't really matter what kind. These ones I got off eBay. I got this one in a set. This one is a non-magnetic stainless one. I think I got this at a home care and surgical place probably about 30 years ago. But as long as they've got a good point on them, you can use any type of tweezer. You'll need some way of getting the units off of the fret. I use a simple box cutter knife. No sense in wasting blades on scalpels. I have a nice set of tweezers, pincer type tweezers. I've reprofiled them a little bit, sanding them nice and smooth and flat to be able to bend photo etch. I also do the bending with these. And a medium grit sanding stick. You know, about 300 grit or so. Usually I think they just say mediums. This one doesn't have anything on it. I usually use my trusty old one that I got like at the dollar store. So forgive me if I jostle the camera a little bit here and there, because it is mounted like literally directly on the mount. I don't have a frame that, or anything for it to actually sit on. So it's actually balancing on some sanding sticks right now. So just give me a minute. I'm going to move these off and load the fret on. So the first thing I do is I lock the fret down on some double-sided sticky tape on my little PE jig that I built. This is not a finalized jig. I've had a few people asking, is this some kind of tile or what is this? This is just a piece of particle board with some foil on it like you would get. I think it had some wood trim or something on it that I just stacked up. There's 3 layers of it with some double-sided sticky tape, and just spray painted the whole thing black. It just helps to elevate it off of the workbench, and so I'm not hunched over so much when you're working on it. We'll use our box cutter. Take off. You can probably hear it clicking. And I've already launched a few of these into the breeze for the carpet monster to eat, which must be constantly fed. So that's what instigated making this fixture. And you'll see things spin a little bit. I just have to. These little tiny hairline fret attachment points on the handles. That's it. If I've done everything right, I should just be able to pry this off, and the 6 parts that I need will remain. Now, you take these off, depending on how careful you were cutting and how the gods look on you, you may or may not have a little tab that has to be trimmed off on the very top. That's where your little pincer type tweezers come into play. You can just load it in like so, hold it in place, and then very carefully, using a sanding stick, I'm doing this almost blind, I'm trying to look in the viewfinder of the camera, which isn't really helping. And that's very, very gentle. You just want to very gently move it till that little notch is gone. You want your piece fairly well wedged into whatever fixture, whether you're using this or maybe you're using like some square jaw pliers. I've even used these on occasion. You just want to make sure it's in fairly deep so it holds it well, keeps the piece from bending back and forth, because that'll cause metal fatigue. And you want to hold the tweezers down pretty tight to keep it from moving back and forth that way. And then you do the other side. And for small pieces like this that will, if I was to try to sand it this way, it would bend back and forth, so I'm going to do it like the long way. I'm going to sand it that way. And I do this little subtle bend to kind of round it over. Just like that. Doesn't take long, but it is a little fiddly. And one other tool I should mention that I'm wearing, you can't really tell, is this apron. And you can't really see, but I have it tucked underneath my workbench, and it actually velcros to the bottom of my workbench. So if any of this stuff goes launching, as long as it doesn't go off the sides over my shoulder, it lands in here and it shows up well on the black. So I'm going to go ahead and finish cleaning up all of these using the same technique, and I'll come back and show you assembly. Okay, all the components have been cleaned up, and I took the opportunity to change the double-sided tape, which was being a little more rubbery than sticky. Unfortunately, the underside was a lot more sticky and peeled up some of the paint, so hopefully that doesn't interfere with what I'm going to show you here. So there's three components to these tool latches. There's the base piece, there is the actual handle that moves back and forth, and then there's a spring-loaded component, which is the thinnest of the set. The base piece, at least on the Voyager set, if I can pick it up here, that actually has, if I can get the light just right here, it actually has fold lines and what appear to be like spots where it would be welded or bolted into the superstructure. This gets bent. This would be the top, the side you would see, the side that's on my finger would be the part that goes to the vehicle. So the back and the front actually get bent forward toward you, and then on the other side there is another fold line. If you can see, that gets bent back, so this component, when it's formed and bent, can lock in place. Now, you don't have to be really precise in this at this point. I do have an old Mission Models photo-etch bender. I usually only use it for really long pieces. I don't bother with small stuff, but if you have a photo-etch bender and you're more comfortable with using that than this, go right ahead. I just load it into my tweezers, and I line up the line on one side of the tweezers, press tight, do a quick bend, line it up on the other side of the tweezers, grip tight, quick bend. The back side, if I can do it without stabbing myself, like this. Use the other tweezers. Now this one actually bends into like a 45 or a 90 actually. You want it to bend slightly back onto itself. You can adjust it later. Now try not to wiggle the bends around too much. Just like that, because you'll get metal fatigue and they'll break. They do give you extras in the set, but you want to not bugger these up as much as you can. The handles, similar idea. There's a couple of fold lines. Now these will tend to bend a bit on the crooked side. I'm not overly concerned initially. I can always straighten it out later. I'll just try and do one, get this one out of the way here. There we go. So those are your two bent pieces. The top spring-loaded part you can bend later. It's not a huge concern initially. Now, if you look at these, they have two holes in them. Actually, might be easier with this one. So how this works is the pins that are on the part that mounts on the vehicle go in the ones on the very end, and then the spring-loaded piece goes on the inboard or the inside units to make it a little, so what happens is when you spring it shut, it actually kind of spring loads and adds some tension. So some people may freak out when they see how I do this, but I do the top piece first because this goes on the inside, and this is a bit, I hope you can kind of sort of see what I'm doing here. Kind of line up one side, and I got to hold this really tight, and of course the thing is not wanting to stick on the brand new tape very well. One side in. It's a matter of wiggling around a little bit to find the other side. Normally I wear my head magnifiers to do this, but it kind of interferes with me looking into the viewfinder to make sure I'm doing this so you guys can see what I'm doing too. This thing likes to bounce a lot. This is why I use the double-sided sticky tape, so if it does fly off, it usually doesn't go too far. There, done. It's a little crooked, but it's done. And it doesn't have to be really tight, but it's in place. Now, I flip it around the other way, and this is what's going to freak some people out. Try and straighten this piece out a little bit first, because it's really diagonal here. So be careful doing it. Now I'm going to take the little ears where the outer holes are, and I'm going to gently bend them slightly outward, not a huge amount, just a little bit. I'm going to do that so I can fit this in a lot easier. One side in. Oh, I didn't bend them open quite far enough. There we go. And then swish them back together fairly tightly. There we go. Other than bending this piece over, which you can do fairly easily. Excuse me, I just got to take this out of camera range here. You need my fingers. To do this, because the piece is, it looks bent, but it's just bent in the frame a little bit. Sorry about that. The carpet monster almost won a battle here. I had to do some reassembly. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to hold this straight piece with one pair of tweezers, and with the other one I'm just going to gently tease it over into a bit of a bend. If we can see that without the glare. And then, and this is something you can do with either tweezers, or if you feel comfortable doing it with a photo-etch bender. I'm just going to do it with my clamp tweezers. Just hold it in there, and I'm eyeballing it to roughly a 90-degree bend. I'll bend it over slightly. See if I can get this out of my fingers so you can see what I did here. Like that. And then tease it over a little bit more with the tweezers. And it should work fine. Just like that. Now you can bend it a little bit more to fit your particular application. This one needs to come up, there we go, a little bit more there. And depending on the tool that you put in there, this needs a bit more of a bend on the top. It'll spring load and stay into position where you want it. I usually will super glue these on. It's one of the few parts that I don't try to solder at this point. I don't have soldering paste yet, but as soon as I do, I will be soldering these on because they are a nightmare when they go flying off. And then you can very easily mount your shovels or your axes, or in this case this is for a pry bar set that's on top of the antenna holders, a gun cleaning rod kit for the Panther Fs that I have. So that's how I bend these. I got 4 more to go, 3 more to go, I think. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, let me know down in the comments below. If you're watching on Facebook, I'll put a link to my YouTube page where you can see some of my other videos. Thanks. Bye-bye.